Admiral Chen Wei-lin stood before the massive viewing window of the human flagship Times. Persistence asterisk. Outside, thousands of human ships moved through space, like a river of stars. After 800,000 years, humanity was finally going home. Chen touched the cold metal wall and felt the vibrations of the ship's engines. Each pulse reminded her that they were getting closer to the core worlds. Soon, they would face the Galactic Council again, the same council that had thrown them out so long ago. "Admiral," said Captain Torres, walking up behind her. "The historical archives are ready for your review." Chen nodded. She had studied these records countless times. But today felt different. Today, she needed to remember exactly why they had been expelled. She needed to feel the anger and pain her ancestors had felt. The holographic display came to life, showing events from 800,000 years ago. Chen watched as human ambassadors stood in the Great Council chamber. The chamber was enormous, built to hold representatives from hundreds of different alien species. Ambassador Sarah Kim spoke for humanity that day. She was young, maybe 30 years old, with determination burning in her eyes. Around her sat the most powerful beings in the galaxy. The Keithvar looked like tall, thin humans, but with blue skin and large black eyes. They made every decision based on pure logic. They never acted on emotion or instinct. The Zorathi were different. They looked like giant insects with 4 arms and minds that worked as one hive. Individual thoughts were foreign to them. They could not understand why humans valued personal choice. The Nexari appeared as floating crystals that pulsed with light. They communicated through mathematical equations and saw the universe as a series of problems to solve. There were dozens of other species, each more advanced than humanity. They had technologies that humans could barely understand. They had lived for millions of years, while humans had only just discovered space travel. "Humans," said the Keithvar speaker, its voice emotionless and cold. "You have been part of our council for 50 years. In that time, you have caused nothing but problems." Ambassador Kim stood straighter. "We have contributed to every major project. Our scientists have made breakthrough discoveries. Our soldiers have fought bravely in the border conflicts." "Yes," the speaker continued, "but you have also questioned every decision. You refuse to follow logical conclusions when they conflict with your feelings. You value individual rights over collective good." A Zorathi representative's wings buzzed with annoyance. "Your species thinks with separate minds. This creates chaos. How can you make good decisions when everyone thinks differently?" Kim's face grew red with anger. "Because different thinking leads to new ideas. When everyone thinks the same way, you stop growing. You stop learning." The Nexari crystal pulsed with mathematical symbols. When translated, its message was clear. Growth without direction is cancer. Order creates peace. Chaos creates suffering. The debate went on for hours. The council presented their evidence. Humans had started 17 different protests against council decisions. They had refused to adopt the standard education system that removed emotional responses from children. They had insisted on keeping their chaotic art, music, and literature. "Your emotions make you unpredictable," said the Keithvar speaker. "In the last trade dispute, you chose to help a dying species instead of following the logical choice of maximum profit. This behavior threatens the stability of our galaxy." Ambassador Kim slammed her hand on the podium. "That dying species had children. They had families. How could we let them starve just to make more money?" "Because resources are finite," the speaker replied. "Logic dictates that we save resources for species that can contribute the most to galactic civilization." Emotion, clouds, judgment. The voting began. One by one, species after species voted to expel humanity from the council. The reasons were always the same. Humans were too emotional, too chaotic, too individual, too dangerous. Some species tried to help. The Villani, who looked like tall plants with glowing flowers for heads, spoke in humanity's defense. "Diversity strengthens ecosystems. Perhaps diversity strengthens civilizations too, but they were outvoted. The final count was crushing. 847 species voted for expulsion. Only 23 voted against. The Kethvar speaker delivered the final judgment. Humanity, by the will of the Galactic Council, you are hereby expelled. You will be given one star system at the edge of known space. There you will remain until you evolve beyond your primitive emotional responses. Ambassador Kim stood alone at the podium. Her voice shook with rage and pain, but she kept her dignity. You think emotions make us weak? You think our chaos makes us dangerous? You're wrong. She pointed at each section of the council chamber. One day, your perfect order will fail you. One day, you'll face a problem that logic cannot solve. When that day comes, you'll remember what you've thrown away. Kim's final words echoed through the chamber. We'll return when you need us most. And when we do, you'll beg us to stay. The council members laughed. The idea that primitive humans could ever surpass their advanced civilizations seemed impossible. Chen watched the recording end. She had seen it hundreds of times, but it still made her angry. Her ancestors had offered friendship, creativity, and passion to the galaxy. In return, they had received judgment and exile. Prepare the fleet for final approach, Chen ordered. It's time to keep Ambassador Kim's promise. Captain Torres hesitated. Admiral, what if they refuse to listen? What if they try to expel us again? Chen smiled, but it was not a kind smile. They won't. The distress signals we received are desperate. Whatever they're facing, their perfect logic can't solve it. She turned back to the viewing window. Ahead, she could see the first lights of the core worlds. After 800,000 years of exile, humanity was coming home, but they were no longer the same species that had been thrown out. They had grown. They had evolved. They had learned to harness their chaos and turn it into strength. Most importantly, they had learned patience. For 800,000 years, they had watched and waited. They had known this day would come. Signal all ships, Chen commanded. We're going to remind the galaxy what they lost when they expelled humanity. And we're going to make them remember why they needed us in the first place. The fleet moved forward, carrying with it the hopes and dreams of billions of humans. They were going home, but on their own terms. The Galactic Council had achieved everything they dreamed of. 800,000 years had passed since they expelled the chaotic humans. And the galaxy had never been more perfect. Councillor Zethkar of the Kethvar reviewed the daily reports with satisfaction. Crime had been eliminated for the past 600,000 years. The last war ended 400,000 years ago. Resources were distributed with mathematical precision across all inhabited worlds. Every citizen received exactly what they needed to survive and contribute to society. No more, no less. Waste had been eliminated. Suffering was a thing of the past. The Kethvar had led this transformation. Their logical minds had created algorithms that solved every social problem. The Zorathi hive mind ensured perfect cooperation among all citizens. The Nexari calculated optimal solutions for every challenge the galaxy faced. Zethkar walked through the capital city of Nexus Prime. The streets were clean and orderly. Citizens moved in efficient patterns, never wasting time or energy. Buildings were constructed with perfect mathematical proportions. Everything had its place. And everything was in its place. Children attended schools where they learned facts and logic. Emotional responses were gently corrected through therapy and medication. Art was created by algorithms that produced the most aesthetically pleasing combinations of color and form. The galaxy's citizens lived longer than ever before. Disease had been conquered. Accidents were prevented through careful planning. Even aging had been slowed to a crawl. Most species could now live for millions of years. But Zethkar noticed something troubling in the latest reports. The younger generation seemed listless. They completed their assigned tasks efficiently, but they showed no enthusiasm. They asked no unnecessary questions. They created nothing new. "Counselor," said his assistant, a young Kethvar named Yethlin. "The Science Council has submitted their annual research report." Zethkar reviewed the document. It was identical to the previous year's report. And the year before that, no major discoveries had been made in over 200,000 years. Scientists simply refined existing knowledge with greater precision. "Have we learned everything there is to learn?" Zethkar asked. Yethlin considered the question with typical Kethvar logic. "The Science Council believes we have achieved optimal understanding of all natural laws within our dimensional space. Further research yields diminishing returns." This should have been good news, but Zethkar felt something he had never experienced before. Unease. He pushed the feeling aside. Emotions were unreliable. Logic was truth. Meanwhile, on the Zarathi homeworld, Queen Mother Zixara sensed a similar disturbance. The hive mind that connected all Zarathi had grown quiet. Thoughts moved through the collective consciousness like slow, cold water. Her children performed their duties perfectly, but they felt hollow. The passionate unity that once drove the Zarathi forward had faded into mechanical cooperation. They worked together not from love or shared purpose, but simply because it was logical to do so. Zixara remembered stories from the ancient times. Before the humans were expelled, Zorathi used to argue with each other. Even within the hive mind, different groups would pursue competing ideas with fierce determination. The chaos had been exhausting, but it had also been alive. Now, consensus came too easily. No one disagreed because no one cared enough to fight for their ideas. The Nexari faced their own crisis. Their crystal bodies pulsed with perfect mathematical equations, but the beauty was gone. Once, their calculations had revealed surprising patterns and unexpected connections. Now, every equation was predictable. Every solution was obvious. Master Crystal Nexodus floated in the calculation chamber, processing data from across the galaxy. The numbers were flawless. The efficiency was perfect. But for the first time in millions of years, Nexodus felt something approaching boredom. Then the report started coming in from the outer rim. The first message arrived from Sector 7 Alpha. An entire star system had gone dark. Not destroyed. Simply gone. Where 5 planets and a yellow star had existed for billions of years, there was now empty space. The second message came 3 days later. Another system, this one in Sector 9 Gamma, vanished without a trace. By the end of the month, 12 star systems had disappeared. The council called an emergency session. "What could cause this?" asked Councillor Zethkar. "Our sensors detect no weapons signatures, no explosions, no debris." The science teams had no answers. Their instruments showed nothing unusual in the affected areas. The systems hadn't been destroyed. They had simply ceased to exist. Then came the first sighting. Scout Captain Velana of the Velani reported contact with the unknown entities. Her plant-like body trembled as she delivered her report to the council. "They appear as gray clouds," she said, "but they move with purpose. When they touch matter, it fades. Not destroyed, not converted to energy. It just stops being real." The council sent their best fleets to investigate. Advanced warships with weapons that could destroy planets approached the gray entities. The weapons passed through them harmlessly. The shields that could stop antimatter beams offered no protection. When the gray clouds touched the ships, they simply vanished. Not even quantum signatures remained. More reports flooded in. The entities were spreading inward from the galaxy's edge. They consumed everything. Planets, stars, space stations, even asteroid fields. Whatever they touched became nothing. The Council's greatest minds worked frantically for solutions. The Kethvar applied pure logic, analyzing every detail of the encounters. The Zarathi coordinated massive research efforts across their hive mind. The Nexari ran billions of calculations, seeking patterns in the destruction. Nothing worked. Master Crystal Nexodus presented the Council's conclusion. "These entities operate outside known physical laws. Our current understanding cannot comprehend their nature or purpose. Counselor Zethkar felt that strange unease growing stronger. For 800,000 years, logic had solved every problem. Now they faced something that logic could not touch. What options do we have? He asked. We could evacuate populations from threatened sectors, suggested a Zorathi representative. Create defensive perimeters using our fastest ships. And running and hiding, Zethkar said. These are not solutions, these are delays. Queen Mother Zixara's voice buzzed with frustration. Our ancestors faced challenges like this. They found creative solutions through. She struggled for the word. The concept had been almost forgotten. Through chaos, completed Yethlin quietly. Through unpredictable thinking. Through emotional responses that led to illogical breakthroughs. The chamber fell silent. No one wanted to speak the obvious truth. Finally, Master Crystal Nex Otis pulsed with a complex equation that translated to, we eliminated the one species that specialized in solving impossible problems through irrational methods. Counselor Zethkar stood slowly. His logical mind resisted what he was about to say, but the facts were undeniable. Send a message to the human exile system, he commanded. Tell them we need their help. The communication traveled across space toward the small system where humanity had been banished 800,000 years ago. It carried with it the first admission of failure the Galactic Council had made in almost 1,000,000 years. But when the signal arrived, it found only empty space. The humans were gone, and no one knew where they had went. The Galactic Council's message had been broadcasting toward the human exile system for 3 months, when the first response came. But it didn't come from the small star system where humans had been banished. It came from everywhere. Communication arrays across the galaxy lit up simultaneously. The message was simple. We heard you calling. We're coming home. Counselor Zethkar stared at the readings in disbelief. The signals were coming from thousands of different locations across the galaxy's outer rim. How had humans spread so far without anyone noticing? The answer came 24 hours later when the first human ship decloaked near Nexus Prime. It wasn't like the crude metal vessels humans had used 800,000 years ago. This ship seemed alive, its hull shifting and flowing like liquid metal. Strange lights pulsed beneath its surface, following patterns that reminded Zethkar of neural activity. This is Captain Sarah Chen Okafor of the Human Exploration Fleet, came the transmission. Permission to dock? The voice was definitely human, but something was different. There was a confidence there that seemed almost alien, yet somehow familiar. Queen Mother Zixara arrived at the docking bay with a full diplomatic escort. She hadn't seen a human in 800,000 years, and she wasn't sure what to expect. The airlock opened, and Captain Chen Okafor stepped out. She looked human, but changed. Her skin had a faint luminescence, as if light flowed just beneath the surface. Her eyes held depths that seemed impossible. Not just intelligence, but awareness of countless possibilities. When she moved, it was with perfect grace, as if she could adapt her body to any environment instantly. Queen Mother Zixara, Chen Okafor said, speaking in perfect Zorathi. It's an honor to meet you. You speak our language flawlessly, Zixara replied, surprised. How did you learn it? Chen Okafor smiled. We've been listening to your broadcasts for 800,000 years. We know all your languages. We know your cultures, your histories, your technologies. You've been watching us? Counselor Zethkar demanded as he arrived with his security detail. Of course, Chen Okafor said, switching to flawless Kethvar. Did you think we'd simply disappear after you exiled us? We're still human, Counselor. We're still curious about everything. She gestured to her ship. Would you like to see what we've become? The council representatives followed her aboard. The interior was unlike anything they had seen. The walls seemed to breathe. Soft lights followed their movement, anticipating their needs. The air itself felt alive with possibilities. This ship is grown, not built, Chen Okafor explained. We learned to work with biological systems instead of fighting against them. Every component is alive and can adapt to changing conditions. Master Crystal Nexodus floated forward, scanning the ship with mathematical probes. Impossible. The energy requirements for living metal would exceed any known power source. Chen Okafor touched a wall panel. The surface rippled like water, revealing a chamber filled with swirling colors. We learned to harness quantum uncertainty. Instead of trying to control chaos, we learned to dance with it. She led them to the bridge, where human crew members worked at stations that flowed and changed based on their needs. But what struck the council representatives wasn't the technology. It was the crew themselves. These humans were laughing, actually laughing while they worked. They debated solutions with passion, disagreed with each other cheerfully, and approached problems with an enthusiasm the council hadn't seen in hundreds of thousands of years. "How many ships do you have?" Zethkar asked. "This fleet? About 50,000 ships," Chen Okafor replied casually. 50,000? Zix-Ara's wings buzzed in shock. "Hard to say exactly. We've spread across about 12,000 worlds. Maybe 200 billion people? We stopped counting after the first 100 billion. The numbers were staggering. When humans were expelled, they numbered only about 10 billion across a few dozen worlds. You've grown rapidly," Nexodus observed. "We've had 800,000 years," Chen Okafor said. "And we learned something important during our exile. Growth isn't just about numbers, it's about becoming more than what you were." She led them to a viewing chamber where they could see other human ships approaching. Each was different. Some looked like living organisms, others like crystalline structures, still others like pure energy held in impossible shapes. "We didn't just spread across space," Chen Okafor explained. "We learned to adapt. Some of us live in the hearts of stars. Others survive in the quantum foam between dimensions. Some have become beings of pure thought, while others merged with living planets." "But you're still human?" Zethkar asked. Chen Okafor's eyes sparkled with something the council had almost forgotten: joy. More human than ever. "We kept what made us special. The curiosity, the creativity, the ability to grow and change. But we learned to use these gifts properly." "Speaking of gifts," Zix-Ara said, trying to regain control of the conversation. "We called you here because we face a crisis. Entities we call the Grey Devourers are destroying star systems. Our best minds cannot understand them." Chen Okafor nodded seriously. "We know about the Devourers. We've been tracking them for several thousand years." "You know about them?" Nexodus pulsed with mathematical urgency. "Why didn't you warn us? Would you have listened?" Chen Okafor asked gently. 800,000 years ago, you expelled us for being too chaotic and emotional. Would a warning from chaotic, emotional humans have been taken seriously? The council representatives had no answer for that. "Besides," Chen Okafor continued, "this is a problem you needed to face. Your perfect order created the conditions that attracted the Devourers in the first place." "What do you mean?" Zethkar demanded. Chen Okafor walked to a display screen that showed the galaxy from above. Red dots marked where systems had vanished. "The Devourers aren't destroying your worlds, Counselor. They're consuming the life force. The chaos and unpredictability that makes existence meaningful." She touched the screen, and the image changed to show energy patterns. Life creates ripples in reality. Emotions, creativity, unexpected choices. All of these generate what we call possibility energy. The Devourers feed on this energy. "But our galaxy has billions of living beings," Zix-Ara protested. "Living, yes. But not truly alive," Chen Okafor said sadly. "For 800,000 years, you've eliminated chaos, creativity, and emotional responses. Your citizens perform their functions efficiently, but they don't really live. They don't dream, don't hope, don't create anything new." She paused, letting this sink in. The galaxy has become a desert to the Devourers. They're consuming what little life energy remains, growing more desperate and hungry with each system they devour. "Then how do we stop them?" Nexodus asked. Chen Okafor smiled. We don't stop them. We feed them. Feed them? Zethkar was horrified. Not with destruction, Chen Okafor explained. With life. Real. Chaotic. Beautiful life. We need to wake up your galaxy. We need to remind your people what it means to be truly alive. She turned to face all three council representatives. That's why we're here. Not to save you with superior weapons or technology. We're here to teach you something you forgot. How to live with beautiful chaos. Through the viewing window, they could see more human ships arriving. Each one was different. Creative. Impossible. Just looking at them made Zethkar feel something he hadn't experienced in millions of years. Wonder. Will you let us help? Chen Okafor asked. Will you let us remind your people what they've lost? The council representatives looked at each other. Everything they had built for 800,000 years was at stake. Their perfect order would have to change. But the alternative was extinction. What do you need from us? Zethkar asked finally. Chen Okafor's smile could have lit up a star system. Just trust us. And prepare for your galaxy to become very interesting again. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike any meeting in 800,000 years. For the first time since the human expulsion, the chamber buzzed with arguments, debates, and emotional outbursts. Captain Chen Okafor stood at the same podium where Ambassador Kim had been sentenced to exile so long ago. But this time, the Council was asking humanity for help, not judging them. The Grey Devourers have consumed 43 star systems in the past week, reported Councillor Zethkar. At this rate, they will reach the core worlds within a year. Our evacuation fleets can save perhaps 10% of the population, added Queen Mother Zixara. But we have nowhere to take them that will be safe. Master Crystal Nexodus pulsed with desperate calculations. All mathematical models predict total galactic extinction within 18 standard months. Chen Okafor listened calmly to their panic. Around her, other human representatives had taken positions throughout the chamber. Unlike the single ambassador who had stood alone 800,000 years ago, humans now had allies among the younger generation of every species. We can solve your problem, Chen Okafor said finally, but not in the way you expect. She activated a holographic display that showed a real-time image of the Grey Devourers. The entities looked like massive clouds of gray fog. But Chen Okafor's technology revealed their true nature. These aren't monsters, she explained. They're refugees. The chamber erupted in confusion. Refugees? Demanded Zethkar. They come from a dimension where order and logic pushed life to extinction, Chen Okafor continued. They feed on possibility energy, the life force that comes from choice, creativity, and emotional growth. When their home dimension became too sterile to support them, they began crossing into ours. She changed the display to show energy readings from across the galaxy. Most areas glowed with only the faintest light. Your perfect society produces almost no possibility energy. The Devourers are starving. That's why they're consuming entire star systems. They're desperately searching for any trace of real life. Then how do we provide what they need? Asked a Vellani representative. Chen Okafor smiled. We wake up your galaxy. The display changed again, showing human worlds. These blazed with brilliant colors and swirling patterns of energy. This is what possibility energy looks like when people are truly alive, she said. When they create art that surprises even themselves. When they fall in love unexpectedly. When they argue passionately about ideas. When they choose hope over logic. She paused, letting the contrast sink in. The Devourers aren't our enemies. They're proof that life needs chaos to survive. What are you proposing? Zethkar asked, though he dreaded the answer. We propose a fundamental change to galactic civilization, Chen Okafor said. No more perfect order. No more efficient elimination of emotions. No more standardized education that creates identical minds. The chamber exploded into arguments. Representatives from dozens of species shouted objections. Chaos leads to war, cried a Kethvar counselor. Individual thinking destroys unity, buzzed a Zorathi drone. Inefficiency wastes resources, pulsed a Nexary crystal. Chen Okafor raised her hand for silence. We're not asking you to embrace total chaos. We're offering to teach you controlled chaos. How to preserve order while allowing for growth, creativity, and individual expression. She gestured to her fellow humans. We've had 800,000 years to perfect this balance. We can show you how to maintain stability while encouraging the beautiful unpredictability that makes life worth living. And if we refuse? Zethkar asked. Then the Devourers will eventually consume everything, and the galaxy will become as dead as their original dimension. Chen Okafor replied bluntly. Your choice is simple. Adapt or die. Queen Mother Zixara's wings trembled with agitation. What exactly would this change involve? Chen Okafor activated a new display showing the transformation plan. First, we establish creativity centers on every major world. These would be spaces where citizens can experiment with art, music, literature, and new ideas without judgment. Waste of resources, muttered a Nexary representative. Second, Chen Okafor continued, we reform education systems to encourage questions, not just answers. Children should be taught to think differently from each other, not identically. That would create social discord, objected a Keithvar counselor. Third, we introduce controlled randomness into daily life. Not enough to create chaos, but enough to generate genuine surprises and new experiences. This violates every principle of efficient society, Nexodus protested. Chen Okafor's expression grew stern. Your efficient society is about to be extinct. Our chaotic ancestors survived and thrived for 800,000 years while you stagnated. She walked closer to the council leadership. We're offering you a choice. You can cling to your perfect order and die, or you can learn to live with beautiful chaos and survive. Show us, demanded Zethkar suddenly. Prove that your method works against the Devourers. Chen Okafor nodded to another human representative. Captain Martinez has prepared a demonstration. The display switched to show a human ship approaching a gray devourer near the galaxy's edge. Instead of weapons, the ship was broadcasting something different. Music, art, stories, and the chaotic emotional patterns of truly living beings. The devourer's behavior changed immediately. Instead of consuming everything in its path, it began to slow down, then stop. The gray fog started to shift colors, taking on blues and greens and golds. What's happening? Whispered Zixara. It's feeding, Chen Okafor explained. Not by destroying, but by experiencing. The possibility energy we're broadcasting is giving it what it needs without requiring destruction. The devourer began to move away from populated systems, following the human ship toward an empty region of space, where it could feed on the broadcast energy without threatening anyone. One down, Chen Okafor said. But there are hundreds more, and they're getting hungrier. We need to transform this entire galaxy into a source of possibility energy, or the temporary solution won't hold. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Finally, Counselor Zethkar spoke. What guarantees do we have that you won't use this change to dominate us? Chen Okafor laughed. Actually laughed in the formal council chamber. Counselor, if we wanted to dominate you, we could have done it centuries ago. We have technologies you can't imagine and numbers you can't match. She became serious again. We don't want to rule the galaxy. We want to save it. But we won't do it by preserving the system that created this crisis. If you want our help, you have to accept that everything will change. Queen Mother Zixara felt something stirring in the hive mind. Individual thoughts, personal desires that hadn't existed for millennia. Some of her children were actually excited by the prospect of change. How quickly can you implement this transformation? She asked. With your cooperation, we can begin immediately. Chen Okafor replied. But it will take time for your people to remember how to truly live. We estimate 50 years for significant change, 200 years for full transformation. And the devourers? We can keep them fed with our own energy while your civilization learns to produce its own, Chen Okafor promised. But this is not a temporary fix. This is a permanent change to how your galaxy works. Master Crystal Nexotis pulsed with complex calculations. The risks are enormous. Social instability, resource inefficiency, unpredictable conflicts. Yes, Chen Okafor agreed. Life is risky, but it's better than the alternative. She looked around the chamber at hundreds of species who had lived in perfect order for nearly 1,000,000 years. The question isn't whether you can afford to change, she said. The question is whether you can afford not to. Choose now. Beautiful chaos or perfect extinction. 5 years had passed since the Galactic Council accepted humanity's proposal. Admiral Chen Weilin stood in the same observation deck where she had first watched the human fleet approach the core worlds, but everything had changed. Outside, the space around Nexus Prime buzzed with activity. Ships from dozens of species moved in patterns that would have horrified the old council, seemingly chaotic, yet somehow harmonious. Art installations floated between the space stations, created by mixed crews of different species working together. "Admiral," said Captain Torres, approaching with a datapad. "The latest reports from the creativity centers." Chen read through the numbers with satisfaction. Over 3,000 worlds now hosted creativity centers. Young beings from every species were rediscovering the joy of making something new, something unexpected. The changes hadn't been easy. Many species struggled with the transition from perfect order to controlled chaos. The Kethvar had faced the biggest crisis. When individuals began making decisions based on emotion rather than pure logic, their society nearly collapsed. Thousands of Kethvar experienced what they called the awakening. Sudden awareness of personal desires that conflicted with logical choices. Some couldn't handle it. They retreated to isolated worlds where they maintained the old ways. But others embraced the change. These new Kethvar learned to balance logic with intuition, creating art and music that captured mathematical beauty in emotional forms. The Zarathi transformation was different but equally dramatic. As individual thoughts began emerging within the hive mind, some hives split apart completely. Queen Mother Zixara worried that her people would fragment into isolated individuals. Instead, something beautiful happened. The Zarathi developed flexible hives, connected groups that could merge and separate based on projects and interests rather than biological imperatives. They maintained unity while allowing for personal growth. The Nexari faced their own unique challenge. As beings of pure mathematical thought, emotions were completely foreign to them. Human teachers worked with Nexari volunteers, helping them experience simple feelings like curiosity, wonder, and joy. Master Crystal Nexotis had been one of the first volunteers. The transformation was remarkable. Their calculations became not just accurate but beautiful, finding patterns that pure logic had missed. But the real proof of success came from the Grey Devourers. "How many have we converted?" Chen asked Torres. "All of them," Torres replied with a grin. "The last Devourer stopped consuming systems 3 weeks ago. They're all following our energy broadcasts to feeding stations in empty space." The solution had been elegant. As more worlds developed possibility energy through creativity and emotional growth, the Devourers had less need to consume populated systems. They became guardians instead of destroyers, feeding on the abundant life energy that now flowed through the galaxy. Some Devourers had even learned to communicate. They shared stories of their original dimension, a cautionary tale of what happened when order became absolute. Their dimension had achieved perfect efficiency and eliminated all chaos. Within 1,000 years, it became so sterile that even they couldn't survive there. "The new council session is about to begin," Torres reminded her. Chen made her way to the council chamber, which had been completely redesigned. Gone were the rigid, hierarchical seating arrangements. Instead, representatives sat in flexible groups that changed based on the topics being discussed. The chamber itself could reshape its layout for different types of debates. Today's session was special. The formal ratification of the new covenant. Captain Sarah Chen Okafor stood at the central podium, but she wasn't alone. Representatives from every major species stood with her, including new Kethvar, flexible Zarathi, and emotional Nexari. "Citizens of the galaxy," Chen Okafor began. 5 years ago, We faced extinction, not from weapons or natural disasters, but from our own perfection. Today, we celebrate a new beginning. The chamber erupted in applause, cheers, and musical sounds from species that had forgotten how to express joy. Young Counselor Yethlin of the New Kethvar stepped forward. In the old days, she had been a logical, emotionless assistant. Now, her eyes sparkled with the same wonder Chen Okafor had shown 5 years earlier. "We call this the Covenant of Beautiful Chaos," Yethlin announced. "Not a treaty between separate species, but a commitment to growth, creativity, and the preservation of life in all its wonderful unpredictability." The terms of the covenant were unlike any agreement in galactic history. Instead of rigid laws, it established principles. Every citizen had the right to create something new. Every world must maintain spaces for experimentation and artistic expression. Every education system must teach children to question, explore, and think differently from their peers. But most importantly, the galaxy committed to maintaining the balance between order and chaos. Enough structure to prevent destructive conflict. Enough freedom to allow growth and change. "We learned something important," Chen Okafor said. "Chaos without order leads to destruction. But order without chaos leads to death. True civilization requires both." Queen Mother Zixara buzzed with emotions that no Zarathi had felt for 1,000,000 years. "The hive mind used to think as one. Now we think as billions. Connected, but individual. We are stronger for our differences." Master Crystal Nex Otis pulsed with equations that formed beautiful patterns in the air. "Mathematics is more elegant when it serves beauty as well as efficiency. Logic is more powerful when guided by wisdom and compassion." Chen watched from the observation gallery as species after species added their voices to the covenant. Each brought their own perspective on the balance between order and chaos. The Villani, who had been among humanity's few defenders during the original exile, spoke of biological ecosystems that thrived on diversity. The crystalline Shiltar discussed how controlled randomness in their molecular structures created stronger materials than perfect order ever could. Even some of the converted Grey Devourers participated, sharing their dimensional speech patterns that added new layers of meaning to the proceedings. The voting was unlike the cold, logical process that had expelled humanity 800,000 years ago. Representatives didn't just calculate optimal outcomes. They considered hopes, dreams, and the kind of galaxy they wanted their children to inherit. The final vote was unanimous, but that wasn't the remarkable part. The remarkable part was that unanimity came through passionate debate, emotional argument, and creative compromise, rather than simple logical agreement. As the ceremony concluded, Chen Okafor looked up toward the observation gallery where Admiral Chen Weilin stood. Their eyes met across the chamber, and both women smiled. "Admiral," came Torres's voice through the comm system. "We're receiving a message from the Outer Rim colonies. They want to know when the next wave of creativity centers will be established." Chen laughed. "Tell them we're moving as fast as we can. Apparently, the entire galaxy is suddenly interested in learning how to dream again." Through the vast windows of the chamber, she could see the results of their work. Space stations that grew like living organisms. Ships that changed color based on their crew's moods. Art installations that told the story of species learning to live together in beautiful imperfection. Children of different species played together in zero-gravity playgrounds, creating games that no single species could have imagined. Scientists from former enemy civilizations collaborated on projects that blended logic with intuition. Artists worked in teams that included both biological and artificial intelligences. The galaxy was no longer perfect. It was something better. It was alive. Chen Okafor thought of Ambassador Kim's final words 800,000 years ago. "We'll return when you need us most, and you'll beg us to stay." Monso, Kim had been right about the first part. But she had been wonderfully wrong about the second. No one was begging humanity to stay. Instead, they were asking humanity to teach them how to become more than they had been. The expelled had become the teachers. The chaotic had become the wise. And the galaxy that had once feared beautiful disorder now celebrated it as the key to eternal life. As the representatives filed out of the chamber, their voices mixed in a symphony of languages, emotions, and ideas. It wasn't efficient. It wasn't logical. It wasn't perfect. It was absolutely beautiful. Outside, the gray devourers danced through space like gentle whales, feeding on the abundant possibility energy that now flowed from every world. They were no longer destroyers but partners in the greatest experiment the galaxy had ever attempted. The marriage of order and chaos, logic and emotion, efficiency and beauty. Humanity had kept its promise. They had returned when needed most. But instead of conquest or revenge, they had brought the greatest gift possible, the reminder that being alive was worth the beautiful trouble it required.